Hi everyone, I just made this Japanese Kebiki marking gauge using my kit. Well, it's not really my kit, but I prepared the blade with the hardware as a full kit and just the hardware kit so you can use your own blade or pencil. I just wanted to make a decent kit available that you guys can enjoy. It will be available from December 15th and please check the description for the details. And there is a long story that I really want to share, but I know most people just want to watch the making video, so I added it at the end. Now, let's see how I made it. This time, I used maple. Traditionally, white oak is more common, but I just couldn't find good stock. For this project, grain selection is really important. Not only do you want with 3/4 sawn wood, but the backside should become the reference face, and the grain on the side needs to run downhill from the back towards the front. I explained these details on my webpage and included 2 Kebiki plans there. You can check the description for the link. When preparing the stock, leave the body and the beam a little thicker than the final size. You can clean them up at the end to adjust it to the final thickness. Just make sure the thickness is consistent. And keep some extra length on the beam in case you mess up the blade slot. With a little extra, you can always trim and redo the slot fabrication instead of starting over. Okay, those are from a board measured 12 inches by 5 inches. That was a little thicker than 1 inch. And now, the wood is ready to fabricate. Let's work on the body. There are 2 mortises, one for the beam and one for the catch nut. The thing here is, the 2 mortises line up in the center because the thumb screw has to pass through the middle. In addition, this thumb screw has to be able to push the beam against the front end of the mortise, so the positioning of this mortise is important. Now I'm pre-drilling the mortises to clear the waste. For the catch nut mortise, please mark carefully and drill the end holes first. If you drill them last, the bit tends to wander into the neighboring hole and makes it annoyingly difficult to get clean ends without special tools. On top of it, please be sure the depth is good enough. For the beam mortise, I drilled halfway from each side to avoid tear out on the surface. And now, it looks like this. Okay, so clearing the catch nut mortise is a little tricky because it's so narrow. Basically, after cleaning the sides with chisels, I used the drill bit like a tiny router to clear the bottom. I made it in this way, but if you have an extra $20 for this project, a thin carving chisel and the narrow round carving chisel make this step much easier. This was the most difficult fabrication of the project. Well, so let me show you how easy it is with carving chisels on a test piece. First, I cut the entrance of the mortise with a regular chisel. Then, I used the flat carving chisel to clear the side walls all the way down to the bottom. And since there's no glue in this project, as you saw, I put a good amount of oil on chisels to soften the wood. It helps the fibers to cut more cleanly. And then, I scooped the bottom with a narrow round chisel. There are also alternatives to make this process easier, like widen the mortise or make it the true mortise. But yeah, those carving chisels are definitely helpful. Here, the beam mortise is much easier as you can use normal bent chisels. This mortise is intentionally wider than the beam because it needs space for the screw tip and the U-shaped bracket. With my plan, it's about 3/16 of an inch wider than the actual beam width. When you finish cutting the mortises, you are more than halfway done with this project as far as wood fabrication. Just make sure to chamfer the edges. A file was useful for this. Next, I shaped the body. A lot of pre-made Kebiki have a nice round over profile on top, so I did the same. It doesn't affect performance at all, but it just feels nice in the hand. Then I drew the hole in the back for the thumb screw, which is M6. Ideally, you'd use a 7mm bit, but I only have a drill guide for imperial sizes, so I used a 1/4 inch bit. The important thing is just drilling straight. Honestly, I was a little bit nervous because if it didn't go straight down, I would have had to redo it. Moving on to the beam, many marking gauges use a 9mm blade with a 1.6mm slot connected to a 2mm hole in the beam. But cutting a slot that precise is difficult. I tested a bunch of blades and jigsaw blades until I found a combination that lets anyone cut a stable slot without using special tools. I ended up choosing a 15mm blade and a Starrett jigsaw blade. Starrett sells them in packs of 5 for about $15, and since you only need one, I decided to include one in the full kit, so you don't have to buy an entire pack just for a single blade. Here I marked the slot and punched the hole. The tip of the blade should sit just slightly closer to the body than the other end of the cutting edge. I set it as 91 degrees, and this slight angle helps pull the Kebiki body towards the reference edge of the workpiece. The picture is exaggerated, but in reality, the 91 degrees is a very subtle angle, which still looks almost square to the eye. Then I drew the 3/16 of an inch hole and cut the slot using the jigsaw blade. For a handle, I made a shallow groove in a scrap piece of wood and screwed the blade into it, but a friend who tested this kit just held the blade with a vice grip, and that worked fine too. Here's what it looks like using a vice grip. You can cut the slot pretty cleanly. Then the moment of truth, tapping the blade into the beam. If it goes in and about 1/8 of an inch of the tip sticks out firmly without wobbling, it's good. If not, cut the end off and try it again. To remove the blade, clamp it with a vice grip and tap the beam lightly. Just don't smack too hard or you might drop the blade along with the vice grip. Now, prepping the blade. First of all, sometimes Japanese hand-forged iron can be brittle up to about 1/16 of an inch from the edge, which means it may chip. This is unfortunate, but it's a common occurrence. By the way, this blade is different from the one in the kit. I'm using it because it's bigger, and I thought it would be easier to see. Okay, to flatten the back, I use the same method as with Japanese chisels. I focus on the 1/8 of an inch near the edge and press only the tip area, then move straight back and forth. In this way, ideally, I can grind down the tip area more than the other side while keeping it flat. If that method feels uncomfortable, you can move the blade back and forth while sweeping it side to side like this. Just avoid grinding only the very tip or you'll create a bump on the blade. By the way, this PowerTech diamond plate I'm using is a good option. I tested other affordable options like a DMT and Sharper beforehand just in case you don't already have one. And this was the cheapest yet the quality was very similar to others. Well, how often do you need to flatten this? As you use the blade and sharpen the bevel side, eventually the edge will reach the hollowed area. Right before that happens, you can do this flattening process again. In case you are wondering, I work up to 3000 grit whetstone. Okay, my blade has a tiny ding on the backside, but it's not in the cutting area, so I ignored it. For the bevel, the blade is small, so it feels a bit fiddly, but you can still sharpen it freehand. I also had a small ding on the edge. I could have ground it out completely, but I stopped once the very edge was flat, because I expect this area will become flat as I continue sharpening the bevel through use. Finally, I cleaned the body with a hand plane. It's just a few light slices, so the faces should stay parallel enough. But be sure at least the reference side stays flat. Then I cleaned the beam and made sure it slides nicely in the mortise. Lastly, I chamfered edges with files, applied wax, and here's the finished product. They turned out great, and I'll definitely use them in future projects. Originally, I just wanted a non-blade marking gauge for rough layout lines back in July, but the idea snowballed into this whole kit. And now, it's almost Christmas. Okay, if you are still here, here's the behind-the-scenes story. The full kit will be priced at $31, which isn't cheap for what it is. When I started this project, I wanted to provide a decent blade that you could enjoy for a long time. But to get enough quantity, I would have had to buy out the entire stock from several small tool shops in Japan, and that felt wrong. I didn't want to drain stock that local woodworkers rely on. Then I also struggled to find the necessary hardware, so I randomly called a well-established local store, and I'm glad I did. I was lucky. They not only helped source the hardware, but they even arranged to get the blades directly from the blacksmith. Since this was my first order, and I was just an individual party for them, I didn't get any discount. In fact, the price per blade was higher than what you'd normally pay in a store in Japan. But this was the only ethical way to get the right quantity, so I went with it. Even with the cost, compared to buying directly from Japan with international shipping, I thought the final price would still be reasonable for you. Then, things went wrong. Japan Post Service suddenly suspended shipments to the US in August due to the tariff issues. So, what did I do? I literally flew to Japan and brought the blades back to the US myself. I mean, I've already planned to go to Japan for other reasons, but I had to reschedule a non-refundable flight ticket to be able to receive the blades, because that was the only way to make this happen. I wasn't planning to make much profit anyway, but now, even if all the kits sell out, I won't recover my expenses. That's the honest truth behind the price, so if you understand my passion for woodworking, I hope you'll consider supporting me by purchasing the kit. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I would be happy if you liked the video and happier if you subscribe to this channel. If you have any suggestion to my video, it's also welcome. See you!